What's the rudest thing a guest has ever done in your home? Everyone has a story from their childhood that still pisses them off. This is mine. I was 5 years old and my snotty older cousin was over at our house. I had just gotten a copy of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out for my birthday. He was getting his kicked by King Hippo, and he got so angry he rage quit. But he didn't just rage quit, he ripped the cartridge out of the Nintendo and spit into it. Then he threw it across the room and stormed out. I told my parents what happened, and they told his parents, and they made him apologize, but the game was ruined. It would kind of play, but would freeze up all the time. My family barely had enough money to get me the game for my birthday, never mind buying it again. I was sure I would never be able to play it again. Then for Christmas this little kid got Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So my older brother went over to his house and switched our ruined cartridge with his. It was awesome. Edit. Holy hit. I usually hate it when people edit their posts to point out how many upvotes their post has gotten, but over 80k. Guys, there are much better, much more deserving stories than this, but thank you. Posted this before. I was a kid, probably 9 or 10, and my mom had a friend and her son over for lunch. The kid disappeared for about 10 minutes, and at the time I thought he had gone to the bathroom cause I really had to go. So when he came back I quickly maneuvered my way past him into the room before the bathroom, where we had a fish tank. This would be completely irrelevant if the fish tank wasn't cloudy and swirling about. At first glance I didn't know what it was until I noticed smashed and ripped apart pieces of little fish faces moving around in the swirl. The kid reached into the fish tank and squeezed the ever-loving life out of every single fish in that tank. Edit. Typus. Update 1. Ended up speaking with my mother anyway, and when I reminded her of it, she said she would have to call me back after she thought about it. After talking it over with my father, they determined the date at which they had the fish tank in that room as 1985, because it was remodeled shortly after. It was 3 large fancy goldfish in an 8-gallon aquarium. They were laughing at all the details that came back to them. The date also means I was 8 years old, so I was close. The time frame helped her remember exactly when it happened. My mom remembers it as several women over for a birthing class. At the time my mom was a midwife and did everything baby, from breathing to delivery. One of the women had a 10 to 11 year old boy who she kept losing track of, would keep wandering off as she put it, and ended up eventually being the culprit. He was not scolded, but rather talked to in a conversation up close and quietly. My mom said she didn't really remember much about her, the kid's mom, reaction cause I was crying, so she, my mom, was dealing with me rather than them. She, luckily, kept track of all the babies/families she helped deliver up till a certain point when she stopped midwifing in the late 80s. She also agreed to try and get the answer of what happened to the kid, if possible, after I explained Reddit wanted to know, which I also had to explain what Reddit actually was. Not nearly in the same ballpark as the rest of these, but my in-laws always just walk right in like they own the place. Drives me ducking nuts. A couple years ago I put some vinyl window tinting on the front door to keep the house cooler in the summer. I could see out the window but no one could see in. I'd lock the door and enjoy the looks of confusion on their faces as they tried to open the door and couldn't. OMG, this triggered me. My mother would come into my house all the time, but never when my husband was going to be in town. One time I was sick, and she walked in, and then she walked into my bedroom. The dog was crated, and said I wasn't expecting you here. I borrowed back the key we gave her, and never gave it back. Wasn't home when this happened, but some family friend I've never met, and their kid comes over one afternoon. Kid gets bored and decided it's a great idea to disassemble every Lego build I've kept over the last 10 years. Almost everything was built from imagination, so no instructions to rebuild again. I was devastated when I got home seeing Lego pieces spread across the entire floor of my room. Please tell me that kid knew how much that meant to you and felt sorry. Cause Duckman, I'm sorry for you. Something similar happened to me. Mom's friend and her sons come over. The older one was about my age. We go to my room to play a Lego, and the first thing the older one does is grabs my Star Wars set, rips it apart, and throws them around the room. I never did find all the pieces. Needless to say, I was pretty upset after that. His mom comes into the room, gives him a talking to, asks him why he did it. He shrugs and says he did it because he hates Star Wars. Anyway, the next time they came over, he gave me the innards of a slot car, presumably as an apology. I wasn't thrilled with half a slot car, but I didn't want to look ungrateful in front of my mom and his, so I accept it. I tried it out later and found out it was broken. Dyed her hair red in our bathroom sink, staining the brand new granite countertop, then dripped onto the new tile floor, then dripped onto the hardwood floor in the hallway, and ultimately slept in our guest bed with wet, freshly dyed red hair, staining the sheets and pillowcase. Jesus, this is unfathomable to me. I've been a long-term guest before. I was just slightly homeless at one point. I had dyed hair, and the color was in these reusable tubs, so it cost me nothing to maintain it. I just had to have a place to do it. Was so worried about not making a mess of my host's place. I got on my hands and knees and scrubbed the bottom of the shower with a magic eraser to clean off the small amount of residue that was left before I even left the bathroom. Did accidentally leave a spot on the counter later on down the line, despite covering the area in newspaper and stuff, and I tried remedies until it was clean over several weeks. Also put one of my t-shirts over their pillows until I was sure I'd have no bleed. I was so paranoid about ruining their things, it just hurts my brain to know people do the same or more of a mess and don't even care. They broke our one TV and didn't pay for a replacement. My family has always been dirt poor and my mom busted her SS to buy that hitty tube TV too. I read these stories with a certain level of duck that person in mind because they're being hitty. It increases dramatically when I hear they broke the property of someone who struggled to pay for it. Hope the punt gets their due in due time. Yes, we had a temporary roommate for a while when we moved back home to make things more affable. A longtime friend of my husband's. Turned out to be a terrible roommate for many reasons I won't go into here, but he ruined every single one of my baking and bread pans. He used and lost all my Pyrex and Tupperwares, and after we had him move out he came back for a few things when we were gone and stole a ton of my kitchen gadgets. I was fighting to get on disability and struggling to pay bills and loved my beautiful kitchen things from better days. Edit, added in between Pyrex and Tupperware because that was weirdly controversial. We had a bunch of pizza in the fridge we'd ordered the night before they arrived. There were 3 other families already there, so we had ordered a lot and there were much leftovers, and everyone who was there at the time had pitched in to pay. The one family who hadn't been there for pizza arrived the morning after and were talking about going out to eat. The families were all okay with this, thinking it'd be great to have lunch in individual families and get back together for dinner. Everyone was loading up, including the most recent arrival family, but when we drove off, they unloaded, went back inside, and ate all the pizza. We would have told them it was fine if they had said, "Yo, could we eat that pizza for lunch?" But pretending they were going someplace and then sneaking back inside and eating it was so shady. Edit, fact. They aren't poor, just really cheap. This was my uncle and his family. This was at my grandma's house. She had just passed and everyone was getting together for the funeral. My mom was basically in charge, and since I'm the oldest grandchild at 24, I was heavily involved as well. We locked the door, but every family had a key. We did not confront them. It isn't worth it to get into it with them when we barely see them anyway. I think my mom would prefer to build a stronger bond with him and his family, since he is her little brother. P.S. They're staying at our house right now. Lol. Stole some of my manuscript drugs. They aren't even fun drugs. They're expensive as holy hell, and I need that hit to not have a manuscript attack. Are you serious? What sort of total soul does that? A friend looked at my search history and saw I had watched FRRN and called my mom from downstairs to tell her about it. My mom would literally be like, "What is your problem? Why would you think I would want to know that?" Actually, she would be like, "Why would you think I don't know that?" My friend entered my home and my very typically shy cat came up to see what was what and greet him. He said, "I hate cats," and kicked her. Haven't talked to him since. And edit to say he knew I had a cat. We were in our 20s. He wasn't a petulant child. Edit 2. I love how protective everyone is of my cat and their pets in general. So sweet and terrifying. Lots of throat punching happening down below. For those asking about the kind of kick this person did not like, punt her across the room. But it was a kick with some lift off, not a light nudge. I do that daily because she's my shadow and I don't want to hurt her when I can't have her zipping around under my feet. She's fine now. She was fine then too. It wasn't hard enough to hurt her permanently. Perhaps emotionally, the poor sweet kitty. It shocked both her and me. Ducking subscribe to Reddit throne. Ducking subscribe to Reddit throne.